Black man rents a room to a single mom, unaware she's a billionaire CEO hiding her past. He had been struggling to keep up with the bills, juggling 2 exhausting jobs and still barely managing to make rent each month. His small house had become both his pride and his burden. So when a quiet single mother knocked on his door one rainy afternoon, asking if the spare room was still available, he didn't think twice before saying yes. She looked like life had worn her down. Simple clothes, tired eyes, and a soft voice that carried a kind of sadness he couldn't place. Her little boy, however, was full of light, smiling shyly as he clutched a small toy car. They moved in that same evening, thanking him over and over for the chance. From that day, his home felt different. Every morning she left early, returning late at night, always polite but distant. She cooked simple meals, helped with small chores, and never complained. There was something graceful about her, something that didn't quite fit the picture of a struggling single mother. Her movements were refined, her words careful, and her silence heavy with memories. Sometimes, he'd catch her staring out the window at night, lost in thought, her eyes reflecting pain and power all at once. The little boy often played in the garden, his laughter echoing through the lonely house. He called the man Uncle, and soon the man grew fond of both of them. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that his tenant was hiding something deeper. One day, while tidying up the kitchen, he found a crumpled newspaper clipping tucked between the pages of an old cookbook. The photo showed a confident woman in a sharp business suit, shaking hands with important-looking men. The resemblance was uncanny. It was her, just a different version, the kind that radiated success and control. When he asked her about it that night, she froze. Her voice trembled as she said it was a mistake, and she quickly threw the paper away. After that, he noticed more odd things: black cars parking near the house, phone calls she never answered, and a strange tension in her every move. It became clear that she wasn't running from poverty. She was running from her past. But he never pushed her to explain. Something in him respected her silence, trusted her goodness. One evening, as the boy fell asleep on the couch, she whispered, "I used to live a very different life." He didn't ask what kind. The truth would eventually surface, but in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was that for the first time in years, his house wasn't just a place to survive, it felt like a home. He didn't know that the woman under his roof was a billionaire CEO hiding from betrayal, nor that their lives were about to intertwine in ways neither of them could ever imagine. Days slowly turned into weeks, and life in the small house began to settle into a quiet routine. Yet, beneath that calm surface, something strange was taking shape. The man started to notice small details that didn't quite fit the life of a struggling single mother. Sometimes, expensive black cars would slow down in front of the house, their tinted windows concealing the faces inside. Other times, she would step outside at night to take mysterious phone calls, her voice low and trembling. Once, he saw her through the kitchen window, sitting in the dark with her head buried in her hands, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened, smiling faintly while serving breakfast to her son. But that image of her breaking down in the dark stayed with him, haunting his thoughts all day. One evening, when he entered the kitchen to grab some water, he found her standing still, staring at a torn newspaper article spread across the table. The photo on it caught his attention. It was her, not as the simple tenant he knew, but as a powerful woman in an elegant suit, surrounded by world leaders and flashing cameras. The headline spoke of a massive corporate scandal that had shocked the nation 2 years ago. She noticed him standing there and quickly folded the paper, her hands shaking slightly. "It's nothing," she said, forcing a smile, but her eyes gave away the truth. There was fear in them, mixed with shame and exhaustion. He didn't press her for answers, but from that night on, he couldn't stop wondering who she really was. Her behavior became even more mysterious. She seemed to know things an ordinary person wouldn't: how to handle difficult situations calmly, how to read people instantly, how to hide emotions behind a perfect expression. There was a quiet authority in her tone, even when she spoke softly. The man noticed it most when she talked to her son. She carried herself like someone who had once commanded rooms full of powerful men, not someone living in a rented room on the edge of town. The final hint came unexpectedly one evening when her little boy, while playing with his toys, called her by a name the man didn't recognize. It wasn't the name she'd given him when they first met. It was a name he had heard before, on television, in business magazines, and in the news. It belonged to a billionaire CEO who had disappeared without a trace 2 years ago after being accused of embezzling millions from her own company. His heart pounded as he looked at her, realizing the impossible truth. The quiet woman renting his spare room wasn't who she claimed to be. She was the very same woman the whole world believed had vanished in disgrace. Yet here she was, living an ordinary life, cooking meals and tucking her son into bed, trying desperately to stay unseen. It happened on a stormy night when thunder rolled through the sky and rain hammered against the windows. The man was just about to lock the front door when a sharp knock startled him. Standing outside were 3 men in black suits, their faces half hidden beneath their hats, badges glinting under the porch light. They asked for her by name, but not the one she used now, the other one, the one she had forbidden her son from ever mentioning. Her eyes widened the moment she saw them. Without a word, she pulled her son behind her and whispered for him to go upstairs and hide. The man, though confused, felt his chest tighten. There was something dangerous about the way those men spoke, something that made him stand protectively in front of her. "She's not here," he said firmly, his voice trembling slightly. They didn't believe him. One of the men pushed forward, but she suddenly stepped between them, her calm voice cutting through the tension. "Please, just leave," she said. After a long, silent stare, the men turned and disappeared into the rain, leaving behind only their muddy footprints on the porch. When the door finally closed, she collapsed into the nearest chair, her breathing uneven, her hands shaking. The man crouched beside her, asking what was happening, who those people were. For a long time she said nothing. Then, with eyes full of exhaustion, she whispered, "You deserve to know." Her voice was fragile, trembling under the weight of truth. She told him that she had once been the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company, a woman who had built everything from the ground up. But success had turned into a curse. The people she trusted most, her partners, her board, her so-called friends, had betrayed her. They framed her for fraud, twisted the truth, and turned her life into headlines that painted her as a criminal. She lost everything overnight, her home, her name, and her dignity. When threats started arriving and her son's safety was at risk, she ran. She left behind the empire she had built and became someone else entirely, living each day in fear of being found. The man sat in silence as she spoke, his heart heavy. It was almost impossible to believe that the same woman who humbly swept the kitchen floor and smiled at his jokes had once stood in boardrooms commanding hundreds of people. But, as he looked at her now, he realized her strength hadn't faded. It had simply changed form. She wasn't hiding out of weakness. She was surviving out of love. She wiped her tears and said softly, "I just needed to live like a normal person again. I wanted my son to remember me as a mother, not as a headline." Her words hung in the air, raw and honest. The man reached out, placing a gentle hand over hers. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "I'll protect your secret." And from that moment, her burden was no longer hers alone. Weeks later, the quiet life they had built began to unravel when her past finally caught up with her. The story broke across every major news channel. The missing billionaire CEO had been found alive, hiding under a false name in a small neighborhood. Reporters crowded the street, helicopters circled above, and suddenly the peaceful house became the center of a media storm. She didn't hide this time. Instead, she stepped outside in the morning light, calm and composed, wearing the same grace she once carried as a leader. Cameras flashed, microphones pushed toward her, and questions flew from every direction. But she didn't flinch. With her son's hand in hers, she spoke softly but firmly. She told the world that power had never defined her, that when betrayal took everything from her, she found herself again through struggle, through motherhood, through the kindness of strangers. She didn't seek revenge, only truth. Behind the scenes, she had been gathering evidence during her time in hiding. Every document, every recording, every message that proved how she had been framed was safely stored. When the investigation reopened, it turned out that the people who destroyed her career had stolen millions, using her as their scapegoat. The authorities arrested them one by one, and her name was cleared. The same headlines that once called her a fraud now hailed her as a survivor of corporate greed. Yet, she didn't celebrate with arrogance. She stayed quiet, her eyes reflecting peace rather than pride. The man watched all this unfold on the evening news, unable to believe that the gentle tenant he had offered shelter to was now standing before the world again, reclaiming her power. A few days later, she came back to the small house to say goodbye. She thanked him for seeing her as a human being when everyone else saw her as a story. "You reminded me what kindness feels like," she said softly. He smiled and told her that she had done the same for him. They parted with a hug that said more than words ever could. Months passed, and the man tried to return to his simple routine. But one morning, a letter arrived with his name written in elegant handwriting. Inside was a deed, a full ownership title to his house, now paid off in full. No note, no signature, just a gold seal embossed with the name of her company. He stood on his porch, eyes wide with disbelief, realizing what she had done. She hadn't forgotten him. She had changed his life forever, the same way he had unknowingly saved hers. As he looked out at the rising sun, a quiet smile spread across his face. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with noise or glory. They come disguised as people who need help, and in helping them, you discover the best part of yourself.